Some cars make you wonder how they ever got approved for production. Whether it's due to bizarre styling, pointless features, terrible performance, or all three, these 8 models stand as head-scratching reminders that not every automotive idea is a good one. Buckle up, it's about to get weird.
Dear viewer, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support.
Number 8. The 1961 Amphar 770 stands as one of the strangest vehicles ever sold to the public, a machine that promised adventure on both land and water. Its name 770 referred to its supposed abilities, a top speed of 7 knots on water and 70 miles per hour on land. In reality, those numbers were more marketing optimism than engineering reality. On the showroom floor, the idea was intriguing. Imagine driving to a lake, then sailing across it without leaving your seat. But in practice, the Amphar was plagued with problems, both mechanical and conceptual, and quickly became a novelty item rather than a practical choice. The Amphar was the brainchild of German designer Hans Trippel, who had been fascinated with amphibious vehicles since WW2. It featured a steel body sealed for buoyancy with a boat-like undercarriage, rear twin propellers for water propulsion, engaged via a lever, a Triumph-sourced 1147cc inline-4 engine producing a modest 43 horsepower. Power went to the rear wheels on land and to the propellers in water, but never to both at once. While clever in theory, the Amphar's design faced a constant engineering compromise. A good car needs suspension, gearing, and power for the road. A good boat needs hydrodynamic stability, corrosion resistance, and strong sealing. The Amphar tried to do both, and didn't excel at either. Performance on land. On dry pavement, the Amphar could reach about 70 miles per hour, but doing so was nerve-wracking. The engine was underpowered, and the tall, narrow body created poor handling at higher speeds. Its road manners were closer to a small economy car of the era, but with extra weight from its waterproofing and props. Braking was also unimpressive, and crosswinds could unsettle it easily. Performance on water. Here's where things got worse. The Amphar floated, which is about the nicest thing you can say. It was rated for 7 knots, about 8 miles per hour on calm water, but even small waves could make it feel unstable. Steering in water relied on the front wheels acting as rudders, which made for sluggish, awkward handling. And because the steel body was prone to corrosion, many owners discovered that waterproof didn't mean doesn't leak. Bilge pumps were constantly running, and dry feet was more hope than reality. The Amphar wasn't particularly safe in either environment. On land, it had the crash protection of a 1960s economy car, which is to say, not much. In water, if the engine failed or leaks became severe, you were in trouble. It was not unsinkable, and many owners carried life vests just in case. It's telling that the U.S. Coast Guard classified the Amphar as a boat rather than a car when in water, meaning it required proper boating equipment like running lights and life jackets. The Amphar debuted in 1961 with hopes of appealing to adventurous, well-off buyers in the US and Europe. In America, it was marketed as a fun leisure toy, not a practical daily driver. Unfortunately, it was. Expensive for what it offered, it was slow and impractical in both of its intended roles. Maintenance was a nightmare. Saltwater use could quickly ruin the car if not obsessively cleaned and maintained. Only about 3,878 units were built before production ended in 1965, with leftover inventory selling into the late 60s. Today, the Amphar has cult status. Enthusiasts appreciate its quirky charm, and it's a favorite at car shows and boat meets, especially when driven into a lake to the amazement of onlookers. But historically, it was a commercial flop and a perfect example of how a product can fail by trying to be too many things at once. The 1961 Amphar 770 was the bold idea that captured imaginations, but failed to deliver in real-world performance. It could neither outrun a car nor outmaneuver a boat, and its constant leaks made it the butt of many jokes. In the end, it remains a beloved oddball, proof that sometimes the dream of doing everything at once is far less successful than doing one thing well.
Number 7. The Bricklin SV1, which stood for Safety Vehicle 1, was the brainchild of Malcolm Bricklin, an ambitious entrepreneur who previously made a fortune importing Subaru microcars into North America. Bricklin wanted to prove that a sports car could be both exciting and safe, a noble idea, but one that quickly turned into an engineering and financial nightmare. Introduced in 1974, the SV1 came with futuristic styling, gull-wing doors, and safety features unheard of in most sports cars of the day. The body panels were made from acrylic-coated fiberglass to resist rust, and there were no cigarette lighters or ashtrays because Bricklin believed cars shouldn't encourage smoking. It was a moral statement on wheels. Looks that lied. From the outside, the SV1 looked like a proper exotic. Low stands, wedge-shaped profile, and those wild gull-wing doors that screamed Lamborghini Countach meets Canadian experiment. Buyers expected Ferrari-like thrills. Unfortunately, the performance was closer to entry-level family sedan. Early versions used AMC's 360 V8, later replaced by Ford's 351 V8. On paper, that sounds promising. Until you remember this was the mid-1970s, an era strangled by emissions controls. The Ford-powered SV1 wheezed out just 175 horsepower, dragging its heavy 3,500-plus pound body to 60 miles per hour in over 10 seconds. In short, this sports car was slower than some economy compacts. The infamous gull-wing door problem. The SV1's signature gull-wing doors were a brilliant selling point until they broke. They were powered by hydraulic pumps that often failed, meaning owners couldn't get in or out without help. In some cases, drivers were literally trapped in their own cars until a mechanic could pry the doors open. Even when working, the doors were slow to rise, so pulling up in style often turned into an awkward 20-second wait while your date stared in confusion. Build quality. From bad to worse. Production was set up in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada, with funding from the provincial government. Unfortunately, the factory lacked proper tooling and quality control. Many cars left the line with misaligned panels, electrical gremlins, and paint defects. In fact, the acrylic body panels often cracked or faded before delivery. Dealers reported that some Bricklins broke down before they were even sold. Warranty claims skyrocketed, and with a $7,500, about $45,000 today, price tag, buyers weren't amused. Despite massive hype, only around 2,900 Bricklins were ever built between 1974 and 1975. Mounting losses, missed production targets, and unhappy customers killed the project. The Canadian government pulled funding, and Malcolm Bricklin's safety supercar was dead before it had a chance to prove itself. Today, the Bricklin SV1 is remembered less as a triumph of safety engineering and more as a quirky, cautionary tale, proof that even the best intentions can sink under poor execution. In the car collector world, the Bricklin is a curiosity, a conversation piece for car shows, and a museum favorite. Its gull-wing doors still grab attention, but its reputation for unreliability, lack of speed, and awkward build quality means it's rarely loved for its driving experience. The SV1 might have been marketed as the car of the future, but in reality, it's a snapshot of 1970s automotive overreach. Big promises, small results, and just enough weirdness to ensure it'll never be completely forgotten.
Number 6. The 1980 Cadillac Seville Bustleback was one of the most controversial styling experiments in American luxury car history. Cadillac, facing growing competition from European marques like Mercedes-Benz and BMW, wanted to offer something distinctive, something that would set it apart in the downsizing era of the late 1970s and early 1980s. The result was a drastic redesign that borrowed cues from 1930s luxury sedans, specifically the formal trunk hump of classic coach-built cars. The idea was to evoke prestige and old-world sophistication. Instead, it evoked double takes, head-scratching, and more than a few jokes. When it debuted, the Seville's proportions were unlike anything else on the road. From the front, it still had Cadillac's signature upright grille and formal roofline. But from the rear, the short, chopped-off deck and exaggerated trunk slope made it look like two different cars had been welded together, and not in a good way. Many critics likened it to an accident in the design studio, as if the clay model had been rear-ended and Cadillac simply decided to run with it. Mechanically, the Bustleback Seville was not much different from its predecessor. It shared the same GM E-body platform and front-wheel drive layout using a 6.0-liter V8. Unfortunately, like many early 1980s luxury cars, it suffered from emission strangulation and declining build quality. Power output was lackluster for the size and weight, and reliability issues, particularly with Cadillac's early electronic fuel injection systems, left owners with frequent repair bills. Despite the odd looks, Cadillac stood by its gamble, claiming the Seville's style was timeless and would age into a future classic. Sales were initially strong due to curiosity and Cadillac's loyal customer base, but public interest faded quickly as buyers moved toward sleeker, more contemporary designs. The Bustleback Seville became a symbol of Cadillac's awkward transitional period, trying to mix European influences, American nostalgia, and corporate cost-cutting into one package, and ending up with a luxury card that pleased almost no one. Today, the 1980 to 1985 Bustleback Seville is remembered less for its luxury features and more as one of the strangest design decisions ever made by Cadillac. It remains a polarizing relic of the era, loved by a handful of collectors for its weirdness, but mocked by most for being a car that looked like it was styled backward.
Number 5. When Chevrolet introduced the Vega in 1970 for the 71 model year, it was supposed to be the company's bold leap into the world of small, fuel-efficient cars. America was beginning to wake up to rising gas prices, and Japanese imports like Toyota and Datsun were showing up with affordable, reliable compacts. GM wanted to show it could compete and beat the imports on style, performance, and price. On paper, the Vega was a slam dunk. In reality, it was a slow-motion disaster. The big idea. Chevrolet pitched the Vega as a stylish, affordable compact with a sleek coupe and hatchback designs that look sportier than most imports. A lightweight aluminum engine for better fuel economy. Rust-proofing and durability that Chevy insisted would keep the car looking fresh for years. A price low enough to tempt anyone still clinging to their giant gas guzzler. It even won Motor Trend's Car of the Year award in its debut, proof, apparently, that optimism was contagious. The problems start early. Unfortunately, the Vega was more science experiment than reliable transportation. Rust before your first oil change. Vega bodies were notoriously prone to corrosion. The steel used was thin, the protective coatings were minimal, and water drainage in the design was poor. This meant wheel wells, rocker panels, and door bottoms could bubble with rust in under a year, sometimes before the first 3,000-mile oil change. The aluminum engine disaster. Chevy engineers designed a new 2.3-liter aluminum inline-4 with no iron cylinder liners. Instead, they used a high silicon alloy block, hoping it would resist wear. The problem? The head gasket design was flawed, leading to coolant leaks, overheating, and eventually warped cylinder heads. Once overheating started, the engine was on a one-way trip to the junkyard. Assembly line rush job. GM's Lordstown, Ohio plant, where the Vega was built, was under intense production pressure.
Cars were cranked out so quickly that quality control was often skipped. Loose bolts, misaligned panels, and wiring issues were common from day one. A reputation in free fall. By the mid-70s, word had spread. Buying a Vega was like lighting your paycheck on fire. Owners complained of frequent overheating, transmission failures, sagging doors from poor hinge design, interiors that fell apart in just a few years, body panels that crumbled into brown flakes. No matter how pretty it looked in the dealership brochure, the Vega's real-world durability was abysmal. Why it still matters? The Vega wasn't just a bad car. It became a symbol of Detroit's arrogance in the 1970s. GM assumed it could throw something together cheaply, and Americans would buy it simply because it was domestic. The Japanese competition proved otherwise, and the Vega's failure gave imports a huge boost in credibility. Final verdict. The 1971 Chevrolet Vega was the car that rusted in the showroom, overheated on the highway, and reminded American buyers that a pretty face doesn't mean a good heart. It could have been the beginning of GM's compact car dominance. Instead, it became a cautionary tale in automotive history.
Number 4. By 1960, the American auto industry was in the middle of its more is more design philosophy. Fins, chrome, and dramatic ornamentation were the hot trends of the late 1950s, and Chrysler's Imperial division, already positioned as a flashy alternative to Cadillac and Lincoln, was eager to make a bold statement. The Crown Southampton was the top-tier luxury hardtop coupe in the Imperial lineup, and Chrysler decided subtlety was not on the menu. The styling, chrome, fins, and more chrome. From the front, the Crown Southampton greeted onlookers with a massive, toothy grille that looked ready to chew through smaller cars. The headlight pods were encased in shiny chrome housings that stuck out like costume jewelry gone wrong. The side profile revealed sweeping rear fins that seemed to have been sharpened for aerodynamics or perhaps just for intimidation. These fins rose high and ended in exaggerated taillight pods, making the back of the car look like it was armed with jet boosters. If that wasn't enough, the body was lined with chrome moldings from bumper to bumper. Even the smallest trim pieces seemed designed to reflect as much light as possible, creating the effect of a rolling mirror ball. The Southampton treatment. The Southampton name denoted a hardtop roof without a central pillar, meant to look sleek and airy. But the execution here was almost irrelevant next to the chaos of the rest of the styling. The roofline was relatively elegant, but it had to fight for visual attention against the fins, chrome, and elaborate rear deck. Performance and comfort. Under all that decorative excess, the 1960 Chrysler Imperial Crown Southampton wasn't mechanically bad. It came standard with Chrysler's big 413 cubic inch V8, delivering more than enough power for the era. The ride was soft, the interior plush, and the features list impressive. Power everything, push-button transmission controls, and air conditioning, if you wanted it. Unfortunately, all those strengths were drowned out by the car's visual presentation. To some buyers, it was a glorious celebration of American automotive bravado. To others, it was a rolling punchline. Why it missed the mark? By 1960, the public was starting to tire of extreme fins and over-the-top chrome. Competitors like Lincoln were experimenting with cleaner, more modern lines. The Crown Southampton's design looked like it was stuck in 1958, just turned up to 11. Even some luxury buyers, who normally like to show off, found it a bit embarrassing. The problem wasn't that it lacked presence, it had too much of the wrong kind of presence. Instead of exuding timeless elegance, it looked like it was auditioning for a science fiction movie. Legacy. Today, the 1960 Chrysler Imperial Crown Southampton is remembered as one of the most extreme examples of late 50s excess bleeding into the 60s.
Collectors appreciate its absurdity, and car show crowds love it for its outrageousness. But at the time, it didn't set sales records, and its styling quickly fell out of fashion. In short, it was a car that tried to win a beauty contest, but showed up wearing a carnival costume.
Number 3. In 1969, Mercury rolled out the Montego, a mid to full-size car that was supposed to bridge the gap between the everyday Ford lineup and the more upscale offerings in Mercury's own showroom. Unfortunately, what they delivered was a prime example of automotive beige, not literally in color, though many were beige, but in spirit. At first glance, the Montego didn't offend the eye, but it didn't excite it either. The body had that stretched, elongated proportion common in the late 60s, but without the elegant curves of a luxury sedan or the aggressive stance of a muscle car. The front fascia was so restrained and flat that it almost disappeared in a parking lot, blending into the sea of similarly boxy sedans. Even the grille design felt like it had been lifted from a generic build-a-car template. From a distance, you might mistake it for a Ford Torino, which is essentially what it was, just with slightly more chrome and a fancier badge. Inside, the Montego was comfortable enough, but hardly inspiring. The dashboard was functional but unimaginative, and the trim felt like it was trying to whisper upscale without fully committing. Mercury wanted the Montego to appeal to buyers who wanted something more refined than a Ford, but didn't want to step all the way up to a Lincoln. The result was a car that was too timid to be stylish and too large to be nimble, a middle ground compromise that pleased nobody. Mechanically, it was competent but uninspired. Base models came with modest six-cylinder engines, while V8 options offered adequate performance, but nothing that could make the Montego stand out in a year when the muscle car wars were in full swing. If you wanted excitement, you went to a Cougar, Cyclone, or a Mustang. If you wanted pure luxury, you bought a Lincoln. The Montego was left stranded in no man's land. In the end, the 1969 Mercury Montego proved that size alone does not make a car impressive. It was big without being bold, respectable without being memorable, the automotive equivalent of a polite nod in a crowded elevator.
Number 2. The 1979 Chrysler Learon Coupe was Chrysler's attempt to offer affordable elegance during a period when the American auto industry was struggling with declining sales, rising fuel prices, and new emissions standards. On paper, it seemed like a smart formula. Take a mid-size coupe, dress it up with upscale trimmings, and market it as a luxury bargain. In reality, it was a case of style over substance, and even the style was questionable. The most obvious feature was its padded vinyl roof, which came in colors like white, tan, or even burgundy, and often sported opera windows for that extra, classy touch. Unfortunately, these elements were more about pretending to be a luxury car than actually being one. The roof padding was not only prone to cracking and peeling within a few years, but it also trapped moisture, encouraging rust in the very places it was supposed to look elegant. The body was decorated with chrome accents and fake wood trim, the kind that looked convincing from across the street, but revealed itself as cheap plastic up close. The fake wire wheel covers spun lazily as if trying to convince passers-by they were real knockoffs from a Cadillac or Lincoln. In the side, there were plush velour seats and a dashboard sprinkled with faux wood, giving the illusion of luxury until you noticed the flimsy switchgear, rattling door panels, and electrical gremlins that plagued Chrysler products of the era. Mechanically, the Learon Coupe was just as uninspiring. Most models came with a sluggish slant 6 or a detuned small block V8, both choked by emissions equipment and mated to a soft shifting automatic. It was built on Chrysler's aging M-body platform, which meant a floaty, wallowy ride that was fine for cruising, but completely out of its league compared to European or Japanese competitors. Worse still, Chrysler's quality control in the late 70s was abysmal, leading to frequent complaints about misaligned panels, peeling paint, and mechanical failures within the first few years of ownership. The Learon Coupe sold moderately well at first because buyers were drawn to its low price and luxury marketing. But as soon as people realized it was more costume than car, its reputation crumbled. Today, it's remembered less as a legitimate luxury coupe and more as an example of how the American auto industry, in the late 70s, tried to pass off padded vinyl and chrome trim as true quality. In short, the 1979 Learon Coupe promised elegance, but delivered mediocrity. A padded vinyl-wrapped reminder that not everything wearing a tuxedo is ready for the ballroom.
The 1973 Lincoln Continental Mark IV was Ford's attempt at redefining personal luxury for the early 70s, but what it ended up delivering was more of a caricature of the concept. It was enormous, square-edged, and packed with design gimmicks that were meant to evoke class, but often came off as overindulgent and gaudy. Design: the Opera House on wheels. The Mark IV's styling was unapologetically grandiose. The long hood, flat sides, and upright stance gave it the profile of a rolling brick. This was intentional. Ford wanted the Mark IV to look imposing and regal, but in execution, it lacked the smooth proportions of its predecessor, the Mark III, and instead felt exaggerated. Then there were the Opera House windows, small, oval-shaped glass inserts in the C-pillars. They didn't improve visibility, but they screamed luxury to the 1970s American buyer. Unfortunately, in hindsight, they seem more like unnecessary costume jewelry for a car that was already overdressed. The fake spare tire hump. Perhaps the most polarizing design element was the Continental kit-inspired rear deck lid with its fake spare tire hump. On classic Lincolns of the 40s and 50s, this bulge housed an actual spare tire, giving the car a distinctive silhouette. But on the Mark IV, it was purely decorative, a molded metal bump with no real function. It was a styling wink to Lincoln's past, but to many it looked like a production error that the factory forgot to fix. Size and weight, luxury by the ton. The Mark IV stretched over 19 feet long and tipped the scales at more than 5,000 pounds. Maneuvering one through tight streets or into a parking space was a test of patience and arm strength despite power steering. On the highway, it floated like a mattress on a waterbed, soft, cushy, but entirely disconnected from the road. Performance: all show, no go. Under the hood sat Ford's massive 460 cubic inch or 7.5-liter V8. But by 1973, emissions regulations and lower compression ratios had strangled it to just over 200 horsepower. That meant the Mark IV was long on prestige, but short on urgency. Acceleration was leisurely, and fuel economy was, well, laughable, dipping into single digits. Build quality and reliability. In an era when Detroit was focused more on styling statements than precision engineering, the Mark IV suffered from typical 70s build quality woes: misaligned body panels, rattles, and trim pieces that seemed determined to escape the car after a few thousand miles. It was more about creating an image than delivering lasting quality. Legacy, a symbol of 1970s excess. The 1973 Lincoln Continental Mark IV perfectly encapsulated the decade's love affair with oversized, over-decorated, and underperforming luxury cars. It was meant to be a rolling symbol of wealth and class, but time has revealed it to be a rolling monument to the era's obsession with style over substance. Today, it's remembered less for genuine luxury and more for its opera windows, fake spare tire hump, and sheer mass.